Good evening, everyone. It is Tuesday, November 23rd, 2021 at 6:05. And this is the regular monthly meeting of the Michigan City Plan Commission. Roll call.
Mr. Dabney.
Present.
Ms. Esbar. Mr. Gallus is absent. Mr. Granquist.
Present.
Mr. Gresham. Here. Mr. Klender.
Here.
Mr. Sperling is absent. Mr. Wright is absent, I believe. Yes. Mr. Zimmer.
Here.
Attorney Hale.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Do I have a motion to approve the agenda for this evening?
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Dabney.
Aye.
Mr. Granquist.
Yes.
Mr. Gresham.
Yes.
Mr. Klender.
Yes.
And Mr. Zimmer.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Next item is to approve the minutes from our last meeting, which was back in August 24th. Is there a motion to approve or any comments, suggestions for changes?
Assuming no changes are needed, I would move to approve the minutes as submitted.
And I'll second that.
Mr. Dabney.
Abstain. I was not present for that meeting.
Okay. Yeah, probably won't get a.
So aye.
Aye, okay. Mr. Granquist.
Yes.
Mr. Gresham.
Yes.
Mr. Klender.
Okay.
Mr. Zimmer.
Yes.
Okay, motion approved.
Our one and only petition this evening is divided into two parts. So I'll let Skylar talk about that.
Okay, so this is a petition for a what there it's eventually going to be eventually being proposed as a new subdivision. But right now, the petition is 902-21, and they're requesting approval for a concept plan by Lake and Blaine LLC for a 6-lot major subdivision on an approximate 2.25 acre parcel of land situated generally between Blaine Street, Mulligan Street, Center Street, and Lake Street. They will be represented by Attorney Barry F. McDonald, and I'll let him explain a little bit more.
Thank you. For the record, thank you for being here, Mr. President, members of the commission. My name is Barry McDonald. I'm an attorney here in Michigan City with offices at 601 Franklin Street. I am here representing my client, Lake and Blaine LLC, with regard to both concept and development plan approval as indicated by Mr. York for a 6-lot proposed major residential subdivision in southern Sheridan Beach. And I guess before I move any further, two kind of housekeeping issues, which is number one, we all have to submit our proof of notice and whatnot before the meeting. And as frequently happens, there are stragglers in terms of certified mail receipts. So I'm submitting to Mr. Hale 3 additional receipts from the certified mailing green cards. So I think that brings a total of 11 out of the 14 we did receive back responses, which is kind of par for the course. You never get unanimous. The second kind of housekeeping issue, I guess, would be, depending on what Mr. York and Mr. Hale think, it makes, to me, sense just to give my 5-minute spiel once, and then you procedurally, if you have to vote twice for concept and development, so be it. But if that's okay with you, I'll just give my little brief summary once. And
may I address some housekeeping matters? That
Yes,
would be
please.
one.
Please.
Yep.
First, I would acknowledge that Mr. McDonald, as always, has submitted his notice documentation ahead of time. I've had an opportunity to review it. He's done a very good job, and we have all the documentation that we need, and he meets, and the petitioner has satisfied our requirement. Number two, I think it's appropriate, although Mr. McDonald knows it, that I mention that we only have 5 members here. And approval requires a majority of the Plan Commission, which means that it requires a unanimous determination this evening. Because of that, and again, I'm sure Mr. McDonald knows this, he has the option to ask us to push this over and reschedule it for the next meeting. And lastly, it's my interpretation of our concept plan and development plan that we provide, that is, the Plan Commission provides, upon review of the concept plan, guidance and assistance to the petitioner owner, and really only has to vote on the development plan. Nevertheless, I think it would be very appropriate to just have one vote to approve the concept plan or not, and the development plan as one vote.
Thank you, Mr. Hale. And I did discuss the issue of a lack of a full board with my client before we began, and I think we're okay moving forward at this point with 5 members. And by way of introduction, the gentleman on my far right is here this evening on behalf of Lake and Blaine LLC. That's Jack Capeless, who's the managing member, longtime Michigan City resident, here to answer any questions that he could handle from the commission. And then closer to my right is Shem Khalil of Global Engineering and Land Surveying, who served as the engineer for the project. And again, any technical issues with regard to the proposed development plan would probably best be directed to Mr. Khalil. So briefly, we were here obviously back in January of 2021, seeking this body's favorable recommendation for a zoning change on the 2.2 acre parcel at issue. If you recall, it was originally zoned M2 manufacturing, and the commission granted us by 7-0 vote their favorable recommendation to change the zoning to residential R1E at that meeting in January. Subsequently, the city council did approve the recommendation and passed the zoning change to R1E in early March of 2021, kind of paving the way for then my client to move forward with Mr. Khalil's firm to get some sketch plans and work with Schuyler's office to get to the point where we have a concept and development plan. Again, generally located in what I would call southern Sheridan Beach, kind of bounded by Mulligan, Center, Lake, and Blaine. We believe that each of the proposed 6 lots is compliant with the R1E district requirements with regard to setbacks, with regard to lot frontage, and with regard to total square footage in the R1E district. The size of the lots actually is about 50% greater than what is required. So certainly those of us familiar with Sheridan Beach would say these are generously sized Sheridan Beach lots, which will make building on them a little easier than some of us have to deal with smaller lots in Sheridan Beach. In addition to kind of the basic R1E requirements, we believe that Mr. Khalil's firm has supplied the additional information that was implemented several years ago when the city and the Plan Commission updated the zoning ordinance to require a little extra requirements and a little extra documentation with regard to the R1E district. So you'll note that there is the outlining of trees, topographical indications of where the utilities lie. Again, probably not as much detail as you would find in a larger subdivision. We, I guess, or my client has the luxury of having these 6 lots facing an already existing public right-of-way. So he avoids having to go through the work of building an expensive curb and gutter and road system and drainage system that a bigger subdivision in Michigan City might have to go through. Obviously, if we receive favorable votes this evening, we would incorporate any comments or questions, or as we move forward, any additional comments from the engineering department or the plan department, and incorporate any, again, additional tweaks into a proposal for a primary plat approval, which would be the next logical step in the process. And just one final note, to not want to keep anybody here later than they have to be, but obviously the parcel that we had rezoned was 2.25 acres. The 6 lots at issue this evening do not comprise the entire parcel. Obviously, you can see from the concept and development plan, there is what we would call phase 2, some might call outlots, but there is additional land to be developed. However, that is not what we are seeking approval on tonight. The 6 lots, generally speaking, would be the low-hanging fruit, and it's those lots that we want to move forward to primary and secondary plat and ultimately sale and development on. The additional land to the south has a few more moving pieces. It will require kind of haggling out some details with the plan department with regard to whether there'll be an extension of a private drive to access an alley, an extension of Mulligan Street. Those are all options with regard to those back potential lots. There's also obviously the presence of some municipal sewer lines there. Interestingly enough, the sewer lines do not have an easement attached to them. They just are there. So Mr. Meyer and I have already had some discussions about that scenario and how that'll play out, but there needs to be more haggling and work on that back portion. And so that's why we separated out and brought the 6 lots that were ready to go before you so we could get moving, get developing. And it could be some time before we come back before you with regard to that southern portion. So that's my short presentation. I would certainly open it up to any questions, and maybe some I could handle, but perhaps maybe Mr. Capeless and Mr. Khalil as well. But thank you very much for your attention this evening.
Thank you, Barry. Why don't we hear the reports from Skylar and Mr. Hale, and then we'll take questions.
Sure. As Barry did a really great job of summarizing, and we did rezone this in January of 2021 from M2 to R1E. I couldn't remember what month we did that. So this is a report for case number 902-21, Blaine Subdivision Concept and Development Plan Approval. The request is a concept plan approval and development plan approval for the proposed Blaine subdivision. Findings and recommendations. The parcel of land shown in the concept plan and development plan was originally thought to be part of the Winship and Bigelow Addition subdivision, but after further inspection was found to not be part of the subdivision, but rather a meets and bounds description. So at first we thought it was going to be a re-subdivision, and it's actually not a re-subdivision. It's just a forward subdivision. It's never been subdivided before. I think me and Mr. Capeless talked about re-subdividing, but upon further investigation, it was never part of that. It was just a residual lot that existed in meets and bounds. So the land is currently zoned R1E, waterfront single family residential zoning. This zoning division is for single family housing in general on smaller lots, and the requirement for street frontage for street frontage per lot is 50 feet and a minimum lot size of 5,000 square feet, which you can see all of their lots are at 50 feet and they are exceeding the 5,000 requirement. They're approximately 7,500. One of them's 7,900, somewhere around there. Phase 1, which are the 6 lots that we're here tonight to talk about, is suitable for single-family residential development, and the petitioner submitted the appropriate documentation for the concept plan and development plan, subject to the conditions set forth below. Staff recommends approval of the concept plan and development plan, but only if subject to the following conditions. Conditions of approval. Number 1, The Plan Commission has not considered and has not approved Phase 2 shown on the development plan. Approval of Phase 1 only and the 6 lots shown in that phase. Approval is for Phase 1 only and the 6 lots shown in that phase. Sorry, I missed a word there. Number 2, a traffic study is not required for Phase 1. However, if Phase 2 has 4 or more lots, a traffic study will be required as part of the condition of Phase 2. Number 3, almost half of Blaine Street is included in the proposed Blaine subdivision property. The northern 20.04 feet, as shown on the development plan for Phase 1, shall be dedicated for public right-of-way for Blaine Street. Number 4, sidewalks are required and should be on the primary plat. Number 5, a drainage plan shall be included with the primary plat application. And I'll just go back to number 2. So right now, a traffic study is required of more than 10 lots. Right now, they're proposing 6, but this is Phase 1. So if Phase 2 comes back and has more than 4, then that's a 10. That makes that 10, and we should require a traffic study. But if it's less than 10, they don't meet the minimum. So that's wanted to explain that one. It was a little confusing. So, anyways, that's my staff report. If you have any questions, I'll entertain any questions of how I arrived at any of this.
Thanks, Skylar. Mr. Hale?
My report for petition number 902-21, both subsection 1 relating to the concept plan and subsection 2 relating to the development plan. And petitioner owner Lake and Blaine LLC, the request is for consideration of the concept plan and development plan and approval of same. The property is located, as stated by everyone, in the Blaine Street, Mulligan Street, Center Street, Lake Ave area. And as you know, the petitioners filed this request, and Mr. McDonald has made it clear that they are asking only for a major subdivision relating to Phase 1, which entails 6 lots. To subdivide a parcel located in a R1E waterfront residential zoning district, we need both a concept plan, which is otherwise required for subdivision, but with the addition of this development plan approval. For a development plan, the Plan Commission is to consider it. It is to hold a public hearing, and it is to approve that concept plan. As noted in the materials that I left with you, copies of our zoning ordinance and our subdivision ordinance, the Plan Commission has the power to approve this development plan or approve it with conditions of approval, or to find that you disapprove of this subdivision. You are to consider whether or not it meets our comprehensive plan and whether or not it meets our subdivision and zoning ordinances relating to the development of property in our city. And basically, that's all my report. You are to consider this matter. This is intended to be a helpful session for the petitioner, as well as a vote to encourage him to go forward with the primary plat, which would otherwise come before us. There will be, one presumes, significant more information on the primary plat. In conclusion, I would just state that Mr. York has included in his conditions of approval subject matters that can be and perhaps should be considered by this body in talking about this project with the petitioner and his counsel and his engineer.
Thank you, Mr. Hale. So open it up to questions now from board members.
Mr. President, if I could.
Yes.
So it's an interesting looking plan. I have to say, it was interesting to hear this referred to as Southern Sheridan Beach. You know, being born and raised here, that was always either Hungry Hollow or Canada. So, you know, maybe the neighborhood change is happening there. That was interesting. Mr. York, or the group, is this the phase where sidewalks, parking, trees, all that comes into discussion, or is that in the primary plat phase?
I think it's a relevant thing to talk about. They did provide us a tree survey. It's your second page.
Okay.
That
is the tree
yep,
survey.
that's your tree survey. That's your topo. So they're required to provide topo tree survey at this time. Now, the tree survey provides us is diameters and sizes of the trees and the ones that meet the qualifications for a tree preservation. So we don't know where a house is going to go just yet, right?
Sure.
So we have a box that's shown on your second page. You see the box, which establishes your envelope for development with respect to your setbacks.
Mhm.
You can obviously see there's probably trees in there that probably fit in that box, that big box. So when we get in the plans for that house when it's developed, we will then, you're allowed to take down what's underneath the footprint and I believe 10 feet out from that. And that's we do that at that point in time. They haven't established where the house footprints are going to go, probably because they're going to sell it and it's going to be individually owned lots. If Mr. Capeless was developing it, he may already know where they're going to go, but I don't think that's the intention of this.
Got it.
So they've provided that. Right now, if he was doing it himself, he may have architectural designs, things of that nature. We don't dictate architectural designs necessarily in our building code. We have some really in general architectural designs, like horizontal siding. A house has to look like a house, right?
Sure.
But we also dictate height and stories. And obviously square footage, et cetera. So I think that they've satisfied that with showing us like, hey, these lots are 50 by 150. They exceed the minimum. A house of more than the minimum size house of 1,000 square feet will fit on this lot in this envelope that they provided to us. Parking presumably will come off of the street, I'm assuming, unless, this phase 2 kind of gets probably further along. But through our zoning code, every house that has a frontage, you're guaranteed one means of access to your house to access the lot. So it could presumably come off of Blaine Street, or if Mulligan follows through, it becomes an alley or some other concept. I can't just thinking out loud right now. I'm trying to put words. It could be rear parking at that point in time to access those. But right now, they're just as good as any other. I guess I would say houses along Blaine Street. I would say they probably don't want to park. I mean, I don't think I would encourage on-street parking down there. I would say you want off-street parking because we all know the situation down there.
Mhm.
And I think that Blaine is used by Watt McLean for in and out. So
Absolutely.
it might get a little crowded in there. I don't know if I'm wondering now, but I hope I answered it. I mean, those are the things that were required of them, required of the for review at this time. There are some things in primary plat, like you heard me allude to, sidewalks. We really should start establishing sidewalks in neighborhoods like this that are really primed to have that walkable feel, or that I know it's like, well, we're building a sidewalk. We'll fill in the rest if we can get this done. And it is required of subdivisions. So, can't think of anything else right now that adds to that. So there are some things in primary that we'll put on there. But I think in general, the concept and development plan at this stage is just I think getting a not necessarily a nod, but I mean, it's more than that. It's saying this is what we intend to do. Are we okay with it? Does it meet our, like Mr. Hill says, meet the comprehensive plan? We've kind of already established that when we rezoned it.
Mhm.
We said this does meet our comprehensive plan. We want housing in this neighborhood, and we want this type of housing here by zoning it R1E.
Understood. And I know the reason I asked about sidewalks is right around the corner there when we did that work on the duplexes, I believe it was. We talked about sidewalks there. So that would be something of interest here as well as we develop that neighborhood.
And I think Lake Ave is what you're referring to.
Yeah.
That's a direct shot down to the beach. It goes down. The thought was is if we can feed to Lake Ave, establish sidewalks, it starts building that pathway from that neighborhood over. So
Thank you.
I have a question. What comprises the 2.25 acres? Is that just phase one, or is that phase one and phase two?
Mr. Granquist, it's the total size. So it would be both this phase and phase two. Is totals 2.25.
Phase one is roughly half of the 2.25 acres.
That's, yeah, I would say
Ballpark.
as we lawyers would look at it, absolutely. I bet Mr. Khalil would mock us for saying roughly a half, but I agree. It's about half. Correct.
I mean, just based on the map here.
Yes.
And you understand that there's a dedication of a road, of some portion of that to the road, the 20 feet.
That's correct. I would think that that's the way that was laid out as a meets and bounds rather than as a subdivision to begin with. Yes, we would also lose a portion of that developable land as we dedicate the 20 feet in the front that really almost, I mean, it really is part of the road anyway. It's for practical purposes. It's just as a quirk because it was never a subdivision historically. We have no problem dedicating it to the city, and obviously the amount would shrink by that much as well.
Have you petitioners seen any of the conditions of approval from the staff report that Mr. York has recited here tonight?
Not before this evening, but there didn't seem to be anything. If they are all as represented when he did his summary, I don't think there was anything problematic to my client, and I were discussing it as he was reading it.
No remarkable objections to that. Obviously, just phase one is for approval, not phase two.
Correct.
No traffic study needed now because you're less than 10 lots. And the dedication and sidewalks. So petitioner accepts those conditions.
We do.
You had some comments from Jeff Wright too, right?
let me just get straight to the comments. Suggest Skylar convey, because I'm simply suggested Skylar convey my comments. He couldn't be here tonight. One, is the applicant willing to extend the street and then convey the extension to the city? I think he's talking about Mulligan Street. Yes, he is talking about Mulligan.
This is Jeff, excuse me, this is Jeff
This is Jeff Wright's. How that extension might affect the south end of the subject parcels. And number two, the status of the sanitary sewer that traverses the lower portion of the property. Neither of these two items are on the agenda or on the concept plan. However, I think it's prudent to at least get a sense of direction the developer is heading with those items prior to approving the concept plans. Lastly, and for what it's worth, Global did a really nice job on the drawings. They are clear, concise, and to the point, professionally done. The intent of the developer is clearly outlined in them. So I think he's just trying to get at what might be the idea of the Mulligan extension. It sounds like a lot of that depends on the conversations that are to be had.
Yeah, and honestly, I don't think Mr. Capeless or I or Mr. Flill would be evasive. The truth of the matter is we don't know, which is why we did it the way we did, because there could be any number of ways it resolved itself. It could end up that there could be more than two lots. It could end up that we talk to the sanitary district and the water department and they decide, you know what, we'd like to purchase that. We could use that as for future lift stations and pump stations. It could be that it just doesn't get developed at all. It's just retained and kept in its natural state. There's a lot more going into that back portion than the front portion. And so they're all great questions, but I just don't think we're prepared to answer them because one of the questions was, is there more to be done? Is there more detail that comes at the primary plat stage? And the answer is yes. And I think not to pick the brains of why we have this additional step, but I think it was probably twofold. A, to maybe give the public another look at it so that, that they have a full review. They have a couple bites at the apple if they have any issues with the development. But I think the second one is also the practical one from the developer side, which is at every step, it's additional cost. And it's not so much the legal fees, although certainly we don't generally work for free, but certainly anybody that's had engineering work done and surveying work, the more detail that's required for sidewalks, for drainage plans, road plans, that's when you really start getting into the serious money. And so I think this stage was created so that somebody like Mr. Capeless, before he has to dig into his wallet more seriously, he at least gets a preliminary nod from this commission saying, yeah, we like the direction you're going. Because if we just had to bring the primary plat, there'd be a lot more detail that went into it and a lot more expense with no indication of any hope of passage. So
I was just going to add the dedication of the street and Blaine may offer up some opportunity for easements if easements are needed up there, water easements or it makes sense to dedicate that street. And Barry did a really good job of summarizing that, the reason why it was never dedicated is it's never subdivided. So now we're subdividing it probably 100 years later or something like that. So
yeah, because if you look at the property to the west, you can see that it was dedicated. The lots end where you'd think they would end. And if you look through Michigan City in most places, it would look more like the land to the left than it does our land. Typically, you don't own outright to the center of the road. So it's just kind of a quirk of that neighborhood. And I'll say one other comment, even though it really isn't germane to this, but it's an interesting point Mr. Gresham raises. I'm a lifetime resident here too. And you're right. I would never call it Southern Sheridan Beach back in the day. But the truth of the matter is, Michigan City is a product of its own success, through the work of people like Mr. Capeless, Mr. Khalil, this body. The values in property in that neck of the woods are so vastly more than I would have ever imagined in my childhood. I think it really is Southern Sheridan Beach. It really is. It is an area where now people, if they're priced out of the first 2 blocks from the lake, their alternative, instead of going to Long Beach or somewhere else, is they go further south. So it is kind of crazy to someone who's spent his life in this town, but it's awesome, really, too, that we get the extension of that cool area of town further and further south. So, and this helps make it so. So, thanks.
Follow-up question, whether or not petitioner actually constructs houses on here. What we're doing here tonight is, assuming the vote is that way, is just approving the subdivision itself, the lots there. So the nature and type of the houses would be a separate step and separate matter. You may develop and build yourself spec homes or sell them or sell off the lots, and then individual property owners would construct their own homes and go through the permitting process for all of that.
Correct. And as you know, that's a process that the Plan Commission doesn't get into, but that's that is, I would say, even a higher level of scrutiny that folks like Mr. Khalil have to deal with when they bring architectural plans, because then you've got the building code issues, you've got materials issues. It is, but you're right. That's where you get into parking, because there's obviously stringent requirements about how many off-street parking places, location of garages, detached or attached garages, accessory dwelling units, drainage, retaining walls.
That's not the subject.
Not the subject of this. I'm just saying, for the public, really, there's a whole other level of scrutiny above and beyond this general scrutiny that someone, before you get to actually break ground on a house, has to go through.
And one final question, have you received any comments, any remonstrator comments or approval or support comments yourselves?
Not unless rarely, we always send out these notices. We always welcome feedback, but I have to tell you, after doing this all this years, you rarely get anybody calling with any, sometimes you do with specific questions, and it's great. I mean, we want them to know what we're doing. But I didn't receive, Mr. Granquist, any emails, phone calls, or letters at all as a result of this petition.
Sometimes they come directly to the planning department, and Mr. York would let us know.
I'm so sorry. No, that's a great question. Thank you for asking and reminding me. I did get one letter. Mr. Bill Taft is a owner down there. I believe he owns one of the houses. Give me 1 second. I think he owns a house right down on Blaine, like right on Blaine. I can't recall exactly where it is, but it is real close to this. Anyways, he said, he requested for the concept plan. He reviewed it and he responded, "Thank you for sharing this. I like the lot layout and I'm supportive as an adjacent property owner, Bill Taft, T Square Development, LLC." So we did get a letter of support. There we go.
I have a question. What's the legal thing that's going to happen to that section of Blaine Street that's part of your property, but it's going to become a city street? What happens to that?
Answer.
Sure.
Okay. So when it's dedicated, it basically just carves it out, and essentially it becomes a right of way. What has to happen is, as part of the certification process on the primary plat, you remember all those certs that are on there? One of them says, will there be dedication of public right of way? Well, we are going to be dedicating public right of way. So what has to happen is Jeff will take it to the Board of Works, and we will accept the public right of way, the dedication of that space. And it'll be defined on the plat what that space is for dedication, if I'm not mistaken. You probably can do a much more technical elegance of that.
My name is Sean Khalil, and you're correct. The dedication will happen on the primary plat, and it will show the sidewalk or the additional sidewalk that's required by Mr. York and this body on the primary plat, on the 20 feet, additional 20 feet easement or dedication of public right of way. At the time of the secondary plat, the improvement will not be shown, but in the primary plat, the improvement in the dedication area will be shown.
And then at that point, it's no longer private property.
That is correct.
Public property.
After the secondary plat, it's no longer a private property.
And the city takes over responsibility for that.
That is correct, right after the recordation of the secondary plat.
After recording, during that process, we will go to the Board of Works. They will accept it, and then the clerk signs off on that piece of it. Actually, it's a cert for her to sign off the clerk to sign off on. And that means that Board of Works accepted that as road at that point, or right of way, I should say, road.
And ultimately, it gets recorded. So it truly is a conveyance, the same way as if you sell your house to me. So that it'll be reflected, when you go onto Beacon, it will now show that as property owned by the city of Michigan City, period.
Okay, good. Thank you. Any other questions?
Yes, excuse me. I may be some internal things here, but we mentioned there was a Winship and Bigelow addition. What is that? Anything to do with this area, or?
It was actually south of it, but it's labeled in our Beacon as kind of it's if you go into Beacon and you flip on the subdivision layer, it kind of covers it all. So when Mr. Capeless and I met originally, I said, well, it's already subdivided, so you're gonna have to re-subdivide, which is essentially the same process that we're going through tonight. It's not different. It's a re-subdivision rather than a subdivision because it's previously subdivided. Today, when it came in, it came in as a meets and bounds description, which is just simply a description of from this point to this point to this point to that point.
Yeah.
That creates that lot. So it got us thinking, well, okay, it's not a re-subdivision. It's actually a subdivision. So I went to the original plat, and we have a plat book upstairs. Went to that original plat. It's not labeled as a lot. So it was just a residual piece of land left over. What they lotted out was actually south of the tracks. There were some lots laid out in there, and those actually have lot numbers on them, things like this. So our belief is just that it's just residual land that was never subdivided back. I don't know when that subdivision was created, and I don't have a date on it.
So the thought that it was a wind chip was just your thought.
It actually had a label on top of it on the beacon, and that's what I was like, well, it's a re-subdivision. So
In addition to what Mr. York said, any property that is subdivided in the state of Indiana, we have to pull the deed, the actual deed. So the deed, if it does have a legal description, inside any deed, it does have a legal description for the parcel that we're trying to subdivide. And the legal description inside that deed, it was meets and bounds. So it was not actually relating to any subdivisions or lots or any type of relation to subdivision. So we didn't need to re-subdivide because the legal description was meets and bounds, which is distance, angles, and not mentioning any subdivision inside that legal description.
So this is just literally the legal process of finding out what its name is and where it's located.
And it doesn't affect really the subdivision process, meaning I've been before this body years ago for different sections in Sheridan Beach, particularly that were subdivided 100 years ago. You come back because they were never developed and you say, we're going to re-subdivide them. We're going to reconfigure the lots. This just happens to be an area of the city that was never a subdivision, the way most of us who live in the city, like I live in Boyd and Garrettson subdivision, and there's all these different Orr and Cobb subdivision. And there are a few, usually they're much larger tracts, like the piece of property that I was before you on years ago, Olmsted property, all the property out by the airport. That's a huge tract of land. So that's a meets and bounds, 380 feet by 240 to a rod, to a pin, to a fence post, or however the heck they've described them. And this is like that, which is kind of odd that this chunk of ground really in the center of the city was never subdivided officially many years ago. But this body really, it doesn't affect what you do. It's just really how we title it, either a new subdivision or a re-subdivision.
It's almost as if this is raw land. Or
Correct, it is.
land that's never been dealt with at all before.
Correct. That's exactly right.
that's exactly a great description, because that's why when I looked at it originally, I was like, well, of course it's subdivided. It's in the city, but actually it's not. And so what the subdivision allows them to do is get new PIN numbers. Right now, it just has one PIN. When we subdivide it, it's the legal way to make it usable land, to subdivide it down to something a little bit more usable that meets our code. So.
And then
all right. One other question. When I look at the drawings that show the concept plan, and I look at the drawings that show the development plan, I see no difference. What am I missing? Why do they look the same?
They essentially are the same. Concept plan is more or less. So we may recall we redid our code a few years ago, and it says, in an R1E zoning code, a subdivision may transpire upon approval of a concept plan. Then, I'm sorry, I'm blanking here. Development plan, then primary, then secondary. So it kind of puts the approval. In a normal subdivision, they would come to me with just a regular concept plan and say, hey, what do you think about this? I'll write out say, yeah, this is great. We'll go over it, and then we'll present a primary to you guys. It's that, it's that easy. But in this zoning class, R1E, we said it's got to do four steps, 2 public hearings rather than 1 public hearing in more or less 3 steps. So it's got 1 extra step in it with another public hearing. There is no difference. That's my short way to get to. There is no difference in concept plan versus development plan.
Well, what a great idea that was.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm glad I didn't miss anything. I spent a lot of hours looking at this. Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions, comments?
Yeah, quick question. In what you're talking about right there, where we're talking about these different steps, I remember this conversation. This is going on for quite a while. And part of the logic was it would give the public more chances for input. That was a big part of what was put into that when we redid that ordinance. I could clear up the whole thing about Hungry Hollow in Canada, but I'll do that later for you. The questions are going to come in over here. I mean, just about everybody I've talked to, they're going to be fine with what's happening there. It's going to be phase 2. And whenever phase 2 comes around, where you'll get some questions, some things like that with running off of Mulligan and coming into over in phase 2. And then intent. That is a big topic out there with intent of single family homes. We want single family homes. They want single family homes, but they're always concerned about Airbnb and those type of these short-term rentals when things are sold over there, because that is becoming an issue out there in Sheridan Beach. So you probably can't speak of intent like that at this point. But those, I'm just thinking down the line what will be coming, and those will be the questions that'll come to me that eventually I'll be coming for answers.
Yeah, I don't know that I can speak to those other than, I'll give you my personal opinion, which is that, as someone who's owned property and about to move full time into Sheridan Beach, I'm not opposed to Airbnb or vacation rentals. To me, it's part of the character of the neighborhood. And it is, as a real estate lawyer, and Mr. Hale can attest to this, part of the attractiveness of people part of our marketing of Michigan City, as we compare ourselves and posture ourselves versus other beach communities, is that we don't put restrictions on rental. And so I'm proselytizing from my own personal standpoint, not Mr. Capeless's, but I'm not certain from a marketing standpoint, as he goes to sell these lots. Yeah, I guess we'll have to see what the market says. In other words, if the market says that we ought to develop restrictive covenants that restrict short-term rentals, maybe that's what the market will say. The market may say one of the things that people like when they buy in Michigan City is that they're allowed to kind of do what they want with their property as opposed to having. Mm-hmm. And again, which is not to say that short-term rentals aren't problematic, but I'm here to tell you, as someone who's owned in Sheridan Beach, full-time residents are equally problematic. Long-term tenants can be equally problematic. And maybe some people might judge my brothers and I who've been down there as equally problematic, and we're owners. But I mean, I think the market will decide, and probably true for all of Sheridan Beach. Ultimately, the market will decide whether there's more value in putting restrictions on rentals or having rentals. I mean, I think that's really where the world of Airbnb will come out. Is there more value in a house that we restrict, such as they have in certain subdivisions, or to let people do as they see fit? I will tell you, I don't know what the mix in Sheridan Beach is. It strikes me as 50-50-ish. I'm not sure. You probably have a better handle, Mr. Dabney, because that's your area. So it wouldn't shock me if the ultimate buyers of Mr. Capeless's homes might also be representative of that mix. I suspect there'll be some people that want to have it as their vacation home for their family, where they can load up the wagon and walk down Lake Avenue to the beach. But there may also be somebody who sees it as a potential investment property.
But I'm part of the petitioner. The only intent is to subdivide.
That's correct. Yeah.
And it's just to get these lots, get it approved properly according to the requirements of the subdivision ordinance, and then sell them off to homeowners. So part of the subdivision process does not deal with the intent.
That's right. Fortunately, this body won't have to deal with it. Unfortunately for Mr. Dabney, as a council person, he will absolutely have to deal with
recognize
it.
The guy on the end, and you hear what I hear. that's a big deal.
Yeah.
I know what we're here to do tonight, but I had to put that out there because
Yeah.
I don't think you hear what I hear.
I think that will be a very interesting and heated discussion that the council may have to deal with moving forward. But blissfully for the members of this commission, they will just have to be able to sit on the sidelines and watch Mr. Dabney and his cohorts deal with it.
Lovely.
Any other questions or comments regarding this petition?
Thank you for your presentation tonight.
Thank you.
I was going to say one more thing I was just going to offer up is as someone who is familiar with the neighborhood and grew up playing in Canada Park, and it seems to be a proposal that meets the character of the neighborhood. It's not a very thickly populated neighborhood. I guess it's probably not the most planner-friendly way of putting it, but it's nice to see single-family homes. You're not going to overcrowd the neighborhood with this development. It doesn't appear, and it seems to fit the character of the neighborhood. So I'm excited to see this happen here.
Thank you.
I'm going to open it up for public comment. Any public comment related to this petition? I don't think there's anybody watching at home, right? That has anything to say? One? No? Okay. You have to come up and give your name and address and state what you'd like to say. Come on. We're friendly. Come on.
Go over there too. You don't have to come up front. You can go back there too.
Yeah, there's a microphone there in the back.
Just in case you don't want to be in the front. I get it. No.
All right, my name is Cindy Batts. I live at 116 Mulligan Street. And I was just wondering, when all these things happen, about what time do you think the construction would start? Or what month or what year? Is it going to be like in the spring, or what are you aiming for?
May I?
Yes, please. Yep.
Hi. Regarding any construction, some of the tree removal, the DNR actually, they have a timeline for removing some of the trees if it requires, any development requires any moving. Also, any excavations, normally we recommend after the winter time, just because of pouring concrete. So in general, any type of constructions that requires clearing of a 50 years forest, I would say. Usually it's a timeline that is defined in the DNR. So with regard to the forest and respect to the forest, of course, the concrete issues and the excavation, we normally recommend in the spring excavation.
The spring of 2022.
The spring in general. So regardless if it's 2022 or depending how many lots Mr. Capeless will sell, probably. So I hope I answered your question.
All right, that did. Thank you.
Thank you.
I would, just to say from a timing standpoint, no, that, I mean, we've got to come back for primary and secondary plat. Whether we'll be ready to do that, I don't know that we'll be ready in December. So if we're here in January, that's January, then February. So we wouldn't even be in a position to get a signed, assuming no bumps, till probably late February, because it's usually the fourth Tuesday. And then, then it's really up to Mr. Capeless about, does he want to build a house? Does he want to just sell the lots? But I would assume he'd be in a position to do that spring, March, April of next year.
Thanks, Barry.
Thank you.
I'd like to have public comment if I could.
Yes.
Hi, Dalia Gigas, I'm with the city council. And this sounds like a nice development. It follows all the rules. It's better than having vacant land there, and we do need housing. So, you know, I think this sounds like a good plan. So I hope you guys vote for it.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Hearing none, public comment is closed. If there's no more questions or comments from commissioners, then I'd be looking for a motion.
Mr. Zimmer.
I was just going to ask Mr. Hale, should we do this as two separate pieces? I think this is the first time we voted with a concept plan in mind. Or would it be appropriate to do both at the same time?
First, I think it would be appropriate to do both at the same time.
Right.
Next, I would remind you that by our ordinance, we're required to make findings. And Mr. York in his report has included findings. Next, as always, if you're going to put any conditions on there, they have to be included in the motion as well. So an appropriate motion to approve would include approval of the concept plan, development plan, and adoption of the findings and recommendation and conditions as submitted by Mr. York in his report. And that would include all three things. That's all.
Okay, thank you.
All right, as such, I would move for the approval of the concept plan and the, to make sure I'm saying this right, major subdivision based on the findings and conditions as submitted by Mr. York and Mr. Hale in their reports, as well as the 5 conditions that Mr. York added in his report.
And the development plan.
Would you amend that when you talked about major subdivision and just and use the phrase development plan?
Okay, yes, so for the second part, the development plan instead of the subdivision.
So to be clear, I understand the motion to be to approve the concept plan and the development plan and to adopt the findings and recommendation and the 5 conditions, all as appear in the report submitted by your staff and Mr. York.
That is correct.
And I'll second that motion.
Move that over just a second. Give me 1 second here. Mr. Dabney,
Aye.
Mr. Granquist,
Yes.
Mr. Gresham,
Yes.
Mr. Klinder,
Yes.
Mr. Zimmer.
Yes.
Motion approved. Congrats.
Congratulations, gentlemen. Good luck on the project.
Thank you very much for your work in our city.
Good presentation. Thank you.
Is there any new or old business this evening to discuss?
I do not have any new business at this time. I will tell you that I'm trying to get scheduled maybe hopefully for January, just because the holidays are always tough to get people to show up to meetings. But hopefully for January to get a presentation on the housing study that we just completed. And it might be a good way to kick off the new year to have that presentation and kind of see where we go from there.
At the January meeting.
I would like to have it at the January meeting.
That'd be great. Thanks, Skylar. We look forward to hearing that.
I'm looking forward for you guys to see it. I think the more we can get it out in the public, the more it sheds light on things that we need in our city that provide a spectrum of housing. So
Right.
Mr. Zimmer, may I add something to the old
Yes.
business? I want to commend this body, the Plan Commission, and the petitioner as well. My personal opinion is that what took place tonight was wonderful. It was actually what was contemplated by the ordinance. There's some discussion of all the issues, giving the developer a notion as to what it is that this body expects, and giving them a chance to air out their thoughts and ideas. In addition, it brought forth, I admit, limited but some public comment. It's good for us also to get some feedback from the public. So I think that this was a very good demonstration of what this body should be doing to help development here in Michigan City. And so I wanted to tell you, I'm very pleased at how this turned out.
And we thank those in person and those online for joining us tonight.
Yep. Yes, Mr. York.
One more point of just new business. I have hired an assistant planning director. It's Mr. Aaron Borngraber. He's right here. And he will be filling in as needed for Planning Commission. His main responsibility is going to be running our Board of Zoning Appeals. He also helps out with historic preservation. He helps out with numerous other things in our department. So yeah, I just wanted you to introduce, wanted you to meet him, see his face, know who, if I'm not around, you can talk to him. He'll give me the lowdown on what we need to do. So.
Good evening, everyone. Aaron Borngraber, as Skylar York has mentioned. If you have any questions, feel free to give me a call, send me an email. I always want to be available to commissioners.
Great. Thanks a lot, Aaron. Welcome.
Thank you.
Is there any other public comment this evening regarding this petition or anything else related to city planning? Hearing none, public comment is closed. Any other commissioner comments this evening?
Do we have any indication of petitions for a December meeting?
I do not have any right now, although I'm dealing with quite a few right now. Or conceptually, let's say conceptually, there's quite a few. But as of right now, no one's filed a petition for right now. So
We did not have any for September and October, so we did not have meetings then.
I've been talking with a lot of people. I think there's a lot of thinking about doing things. So I hope, but I do think there will be some things either probably not in December, but probably after the first of the year.
So we're still on schedule for the December meeting.
As of right now, I'm not going to cancel it because something could come in. I would prefer not to, just in case there is something we need to deal with.
Just for public notice, it's still on schedule unless nobody files a petition.
Agreed. Yep. Agreed. Yep.
And that is December 28th.
Yes. As long as everybody's here. So yeah, we probably should think about that one. Let's give it some time, and if there's not any petitions, we will just consider a cancellation postponement at a later time.
Is there a deadline for filing petitions prior to the
A
meeting?
month prior to the meeting, 30 days prior. Sorry, I should say that.
So that'll be next week,
Next week, the deadline. So
just for public notice.
good point.
Any other commissioner comments?
Yes, I just want to say it feels great to have something positive done, to get something positive done. It feels awesome.
Yeah.
I had to say it. I'm sorry, but it feels great to get something positive done while sitting up here. Thank you.
That's it. Have a nice Thanksgiving, everyone, and we'll see you next month.
Thank you very much. Thank you for petitioners.